In her memoir, Dolly Parton tells a story about taking a trip to Los Angeles one time, where she learned that there was a bar in LA doing a Dolly Parton look-alike contest. And true to her nature, she decided it would be fun if she entered the contest. The contest was judged by having each contestant walk across the stage, and the audience would applaud the one that looked the most like Dolly. And those with the most applause got called back for finalists round. And she laughs. She didn't even make it to the finalists round. And that the person who won was a man dressed in drag. And in true Dolly fashion, she says, "He was way too pretty to ever be me." That I had too many wrinkles, too many crow's feet around my eyes. They weren't expecting me to look like a human being, she writes. And those that did great looked perfect. See, I have a nagging suspicion that I do a real similar thing with God's presence in my own life. And I doubt that I'm alone. I expect God to show up looking a certain way, behaving a certain way, to show up in a very particular way, and that when that doesn't happen, I am afraid that, like audience members there to celebrate Dolly Parton, I may in fact miss the real thing when it's right in front of me. I'm convinced that God is present in my life, in yours, in 100 different ways each day that pass me by with no applause. In sunrises and cool breezes, in the laughter of my children. But because that dang sunrise comes so early in the morning, I don't have eyes to see it. And because the laughter comes in the midst of the mad rush to get these heathens bathed, fed, and asleep by bedtime, I don't often have ears to hear the laughing as the presence of God in our lives that it most certainly is. I'm too busy, too blinded, too preoccupied with the way my life is going, with the things that I need to do and the duties all around me to see the presence of God in my life. And I miss it just like so many people missed that Jesus was the presence of God in their world too. So that this morning is about having the eyes to see and the ears to hear when Christ is present in our lives, especially in unexpected ways and in strange places. That's what happens with Jacob this morning. For the first time in his life, Jacob has an encounter with the living God in this text this morning. We have no evidence in the text that he was raised faithful to this God at all, that he'd ever encountered him, that this is a part of their lives at all. Maybe it is. Maybe that's assumed because this is Abraham's family and Isaac was the son of Abraham. I'm not sure what the text wants us to think right there, but it's not there. This is the first place we have recorded where Jacob and God interact with each other themselves. And it's in one of the last places that I think Jacob probably would expect to look. In the wilderness. In the wilderness. A place a great many of us are living in even now. Wildernesses are paradoxical places in the Bible. They represent barrenness and struggle and exile. Much later in the biblical story, the Israelites will wander these same wildernesses for 40 years. Jesus will go out into the wilderness to fast for 40 days of solitude. But there's another side to the wilderness experience also. It's a place of divine revelation. It's a place where the busyness and the duties and the hubbub of everyday life gets peeled back for a while, even in pain, and the presence of God can speak and shine through in new ways. It's in the desert that Moses receives the Ten Commandments. It's in the desert that God passes Moses by, and Moses' face glows for the rest of his life because of this wilderness experience. The Israelites wander the wilderness for 40 years to be sure, and that is a long time, and there are some very close calls during those years. But it's there in the wilderness over this time that they learn what it means to be the people of God and to live in relationship with a living God. This is the paradox of the wilderness. Some of God's most fertile revelations come during times of spiritual drought. It's in the wilderness that Elijah hears the voice of God on the side of a mountain, and the voice comes to Elijah not as an earthquake, not as a fire, not as a tornado, but in the sound of sheer silence. What a beautiful oxymoron that is. That God's voice speaks to Elijah in the sound of sheer silence. And Elijah heard it and recognized it for what it really was, the voice of God. It would be like one of those audience members watching Dolly walk across the stage and jumping up and going, "That's the real thing. That's Dolly, everybody. That's really her." Seeing that even though her appearance is more subtle than they imagined, that she showed up not looking quite like they thought she would. This is the real presence among us. That's the paradox of the wilderness. It is both barren and fertile. It's isolating, and yet the isolation is what makes communion with God on a deeper level possible for those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. Jacob isn't in the wilderness by his own choice any more than the rest of us go there. He's pushed there. He leaves his home fleeing for his life for fear of his brother Esau. And they've been locked in this sibling rivalry since they were born, these two fraternal twins, Esau and Jacob. There's a heartbreaking line in their story where it says that their father Isaac loved Esau because he was a man of the woods, an outdoorsy person. And Rebekah, their mother, loves Jacob. Oof. This is not a healthy family. Esau is traditionally masculine, a hunter and a hairy man. Jacob is more traditionally feminine. He is smooth-skinned, the text says, lives in tents and loves to cook. Is this why their parents love them differently? Or is it their parents' love that drive these differences? And then the plot thickens. On his deathbed, their father Isaac wants to bless Esau before he dies. He sends Esau to go hunting, promising to bless him when he gets back with food. Rebekah, the mother, overhears this and comes up with a plot to get the blessing to be put on Jacob instead of Esau. She sends Jacob into the fields to take 2 sheep from their flocks and make those sheep into delicious stews. And then she takes the skin from the sheep and puts them on Jacob's arms. And when the stew is ready and the Esau suit is made, she sends Jacob into Esau's death room with the stew ready to get the blessing. And I'm sorry, I said Esau, but I mean Isaac, right? The father. And immediately Isaac is suspicious. He says, it's the voice of Jacob, but the hands of Esau. It's a nearly comical, and not nearly, it's just comical. I think that we're probably supposed to laugh at someone being tricked by sheep's skin and wool on their hands into thinking it's another person. I think we're supposed to laugh at how silly Isaac comes across, being able to hear that this is Jacob and still not catching on. Or maybe he does catch on. Who knows? And so Jacob goes in, he gives the stew. Isaac is suspicious. He presses his suspicions down, and then he speaks a blessing over Jacob. And he says that you will live on land that is fertile. It will grow up and make you rich and prosperous, and all of your brothers will serve you, and you will be over nations. He speaks an incredible blessing. And then later Esau does return back with the kill, and Esau finally returns back with food that he had promised to bring to Isaac. And when he comes in, Isaac, understanding washes over Isaac, and he tells Esau, I'm so sorry, but I've already given your blessing to your brother. And Esau weeps. He weeps. And he begs his father, can't you bless me too, Father? And Esau says, I'm so sorry, son. I've already given that blessing to your brother, but I'll try. So Esau draws close, and Isaac speaks a blessing over him. You will live far away from fertile land, where the rain doesn't fall. You will serve your brother. Not much of a blessing. There's another word I might use for that. And Esau is furious with Isaac for speaking such awful things over him. No, my bad. Sorry. He's furious with Jacob for stealing his father's blessing. And Esau plots to murder Jacob the moment that their father passes away. Pause the story right here. Blessings aren't zero-sum commodities. It's not like you're divvying up a plot of land because there's only X amount of land and everybody has to get so much. You can bless as many or as much as you want. The only thing preventing Isaac from blessing all of his children is Isaac. The only reason Isaac can't bless them all, and apparently there are more brothers than just Jacob and Esau, even though they're not named or in the story, is because Isaac can't bless them all. He's the one that's limited. And it's sad that some parents are like this. Esau should be mad at his dad. He should be mad at Isaac for being a father who doesn't have enough affection and love and blessing for all of his children. But instead, his anger turns to murderous rage against his brother for competing for what little love there is to be had from this father. Seeking to save Jacob's life, his mother steps into the story again, packs him a bag, tells him where to go, and sends Jacob fleeing for his life so that his brother will not kill him. This is a very real and present threat on his life. These are not people who are overreacting. Esau is capable of murder. And this is where our story comes in today. Jacob is a refugee fleeing for his life. He's not running from political danger, but from family danger. In the United States, the rate of homeless youth has gone up significantly since COVID started. And specifically, the vast majority of homeless youth we know are LGBTQ children, disproportionately boys. Boys whose fathers were something like Isaac, who didn't have enough love in their hearts to accept their children for who they are. And this is where I always wonder how much Jacob, being more feminine than Esau, played a role in Isaac's favoritism. It's impossible to know, but these are not insignificant details that the stories give us. Like Jacob, many LGBTQ youth are sent to the streets when they come out. It's also one of the reasons that we work so hard to support the GSA over at Norman High, the Gender and Sexuality Alliance. Last year, you may remember, we all wrote cards of affirmation that we shared with them. The year before that, we paid to sponsor a learning lunch that these children put on for their teachers so that they could feed their teachers and teach their own teachers what they need to be safe in this world. And I see Jacob's plight as a parallel to theirs in some way. See, Jacob didn't leave home by choice to make something of himself to succeed in the world. He was pushed out into the world before he was ready, and he had to go for his own safety. And then out in the wilderness, in the middle of the desert with nothing but a rock to put his head on, for the first time in his life, Jacob has an encounter with the living God. And he dreams. He dreams of a ladder connecting heaven to earth. And angels, great multitude of angels, going up and down on this ladder, taking orders from God and bringing them to earth to execute. And then he says he sees God step out into the top of the ladder, whose voice begins to boom and speak. He sees Jacob. I see you here in the wilderness, in the desert, and I will take care of you. I will keep you safe in the wilderness. I will prosper you, God says. And one day I will bring you back here to this place, to what was your father's land, so that you can work it again. And Jacob wakes up, maybe for the first time in his life, knowing the presence of God in it. Knowing that as barren as the landscape around him is, he is not alone. And that God will in fact deliver him, whatever may come. That's why I picked this passage this morning, because a lot of us feel as if we are in a wilderness. So much in our world is uncertain, so much in our nation is unsure. We don't know what the future holds for us. And all throughout the Bible, wildernesses are places of divine encounter and revelation. And it took Jacob being driven from his home into a wilderness for him to finally meet God there. I don't think we're in this wilderness by choice, but our prayer is a simple one. May God give us eyes to see and ears to hear the presence of God with us, even now, even here, even and especially maybe in the wilderness. Jacob does something that I think is really powerful. Not in this passage, but much later on. Jacob's name, he will wrestle with God and his name will be changed to Israel. He becomes the father of the nation of Israel. He has 12 sons of his own that all have a lot of sons. And each of these 12 children, 12 sons, become the father of their own tribe. You see how the exponential growth works? My point is, here we have a man who was pressed out, driven from his own family, and he responds by creating a new one. By creating another family that is blessed in God's eyes and beloved. And I think that's what we're trying to do here at North Haven. Some of you, like Jacob, were forced out of churches along the way. Told that you weren't welcome, sometimes explicitly, sometimes made to know that just as clearly, but not explicitly. And we come from all kinds of different backgrounds, and we come here to this place, and together we are trying to do what Jacob did. We're creating a new family. We're creating a new community of people so that when we find ourselves in the wilderness, we don't find ourselves there alone. Whatever the future holds, church, we will get through it together. This church will be there for you, and through this church, you will have the opportunity to be there for someone else in need too. We may indeed be in the wilderness, but we're here together, and God is here with us. We've already survived so much, church. We can and we will make it a little further. And I believe in you. I believe in our mission here. And I believe that together we will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. Amen.